Beneath the African continent lies some of the most valuable earth on the planet. Yet the people living above it remain among the most vulnerable. The Democratic Republic of Congo sits on an estimated $24 trillion in mineral wealth. But the extraction of this wealth relies on impoverished, informal labor and architecture, a self-reinforcing trap where climate, resource greed, and conflict converge. The collapse begins where geographic borders end, at the intersection of climate shifts, predatory mineral extraction, and armed power. In South Sudan, regional climate shifts have triggered the permanent expansion of the Sud wetlands. The floodwaters have submerged entire agricultural counties, destroying the land families rely on for survival. Displaced agro-pastoralists have turned to desperate survival tactics. With their livestock and crops gone, people wade through deep water to harvest wild water lilies, grinding the seeds for food and drying invasive weeds for cooking fuel. This hydrologic collapse mirrors the agricultural crisis in Burundi. There, smallholder farmers rely on rain-fed agriculture, but extreme weather swings between erratic dry periods and torrential downpours cripple their annual harvests. When land and food become scarce, nations often fall into a conflict trap. Desperation over diminishing resources creates new avenues for armed rebellion and violent competition. Environmental collapse destroys local food sovereignty, forcing vulnerable populations into dependency or displacement long before a single shot is fired. This map shows the geographic distribution of mineral reserves in the DRC. The shaded area in the southeastern region outlines the country's copper belt. The region is the source for specific critical minerals required by the global tech industry, including copper, cobalt, and coltan. Driven by the production of electric vehicle batteries, global demand for cobalt surged 26-fold between 2000 and 2020. Yet, as this graph shows, wages for the miners themselves have remained stagnant. Up to 30% of the DRC's cobalt is extracted by artisanal and small-scale miners. They work in hazardous, unreinforced dirt tunnels, digging by hand while exposed to toxic chemicals. This is a system of cannibal capitalism. Global supply chains absorb cheap raw materials, but offload the environmental degradation and human costs directly onto the local population. The wealth generated by these minerals bypasses the local economy. The value is captured by foreign manufacturers, turning raw dirt into clean modern manufacturing thousands of miles away. This extractive model traces back to colonial rule and post-colonial dictatorships, which institutionalized a system of rent-seeking and state corruption. The global transition to clean energy relies on this mineral boom, but in its current form, it is fueling an exploitative cycle that keeps the DRC impoverished. When you mix resource scarcity with extreme poverty and corrupt governance, it inevitably ignites armed conflict. This map details the density of armed groups operating in the North and South Kivu regions. Dozens of rebel militias fight for control over these mineral-rich territories to fund their operations. The human toll of this violence is staggering. Millions of civilians have been forcibly displaced from their homes, ending up in sprawling, overcrowded encampments under makeshift plastic tents. In these conditions, secondary public health crises erupt quickly. Displaced populations face outbreaks of cholera, measles, and recurring Ebola epidemics. This has placed immense strain on humanitarian organizations. Faced with global funding shortfalls, agencies like the WFP are slashing the food assistance that millions rely on for survival. The collapse of state protection, coupled with the withdrawal of international aid, leaves these populations exposed to the elements, to disease, and to the militias. In the Central African Republic, communities are finding ways to respond to failing state systems. The country faces one of the highest maternal mortality rates in the world. Pregnant women face life-threatening risks because they must give birth far from clinical facilities. The solution is community-led. Localities are choosing their own midwives, who are trained to provide essential antenatal care and guide mothers through safe deliveries. By moving away from centralized infrastructure, these midwives have bypassed the state's collapse, contributing to a 30% decrease in home deliveries in the areas where they operate. While local resilience saves lives on the ground, it cannot address the structural causes of these crises alone. Ending this cycle requires structural accountability. Multinational corporations must be forced to trace their supply chains, ensure fair compensation, and stop the indirect funding of conflict. Global climate adaptation funds must reach the grassroots level. Vulnerable populations need the resources to build sustainable infrastructure before the next disaster strikes. True stability in the world's poorest nations will only arrive when the global community stops extracting their wealth and starts investing in their future.